Welcome back. This is the Scaling Secrets podcast, and Nancy Mancilla is here from isosgroup.com. Nancy is the founder of North America's leading provider of sustainability ESG disclosure services. They are called ISOS Group. And so we're going to be finding out about what Nancy has done as far as training and advising experts since 2008 and increasing scores among various ratings and rankings group. And she's earned numerous accolades and accomplished many things, but there's still so much to do as far as changing the world, saving the world, and bringing awareness. So Nancy, glad to be speaking with you.
Likewise. Thanks for inviting me, Robert.
Glad to have you. And so as far as what you do, I see all these like acronyms and letters and terms. So in like simple layperson's terms, like what sort of difference do you make in the world and what makes you stand out?
So, I think you touched on that. There's this misunderstanding of what sustainability means, mainly because there's so many angles that we can take in this. There's everything from, building renewable energy facilities to reducing emissions in any given way. But in our practice, we focus more on disclosure. So more and more increasingly, we're starting to see companies putting information out there into the public, or whether that's through their SEC regulated financial reporting, or just in general, to speak to stakeholders of all kinds, not just shareholders, about their efforts to identify risks related to the environment or society and how they're addressing those risks and how they're managing so that they reduce any impacts that they might have. So that's the work that we do. It's all around reporting. So we do everything to enable that, whether that's working on greenhouse gas accounting, whether that's building policies around human rights or sustainability in general, green procurement checklists, navigating the corridors of the organization and trying to help build their capacity to lead change, and then all the way through to the beautifully designed glossy reports that we might see on the web via any publicly traded company for sure. We're starting to see that now more so with the small to medium-sized companies as well.
Wonderful. So you help them navigate all these different things. And I was blown away, I think maybe even 6 months ago, when someone told me that if you care about the environment and you are concerned about, well, is this or that huge company, are they, using like slave labor overseas, or are they being kind of careless with their, dumping in whatever river, you can look these things up. And we live in this world now where basically any company who has a website, they have to generate all this content just to kind of, rank for Google and rank for SEO purposes. And so they publish all these things. They have all of this information on their websites just about what they're doing as far as sustainability. And like you said, there's all these different aspects. And so I was like, that's crazy. And that's an amazing time to be alive, where you can just kind of do your own research and do your own digging and see if you've heard this or that, if you heard these rumors, or you say, well, should I support or give this company my business or not, then you can like look up these reports and kind of look up this information, and then just to kind of fight the disinformation and
That's
fight
right.
the just the things that you hear about as far as climate change and about sustainability and like what companies are doing. And so you mentioned in there that you're all about kind of fighting the assumptions. And so is there any sort of just assumption as far as this business you're in, that is there anything that grinds your gears that you feel like setting the record straight about?
Yeah, you keep bringing up some really good points. There's something called greenwashing, of course, that a lot of outsiders, I say outsiders, meaning anyone who has not gone through this process and developed these types of reports for companies, it's really easy for them to pick something up and say, oh, that's just marketing or that's just greenwashing. But they don't realize that this is the culmination of all of these efforts to take corrective action internally and externally, and to really rework the organization's objectives and the way they operate. And that's a huge undertaking. And it's usually done by just a few individuals internally. So it really, it's admirable work. And again, I think that there's a lot of misunderstanding out there in the marketplace about all that goes into it, and all the work that the companies are actually doing to try to create positive change.
So greenwashing is this thing that happens where they are just like putting out the lip service and just putting out the marketing. But you're saying that there's a whole process to what you do, and there are rules, and there's actual like reports and standards, so that way it's the rules are in place, so that way a company can actually be doing things, and it's not just trying to look good. Like you hear about these bad things that are happening, say with like carbon credits or things that just like look good on paper but are not actually making a difference. So you're saying that this sort of reporting that you do and that you help these companies navigate is actually making a difference.
It really is. And, kind of back to one of the other points that you made about who's picking up this information. I mean, first and foremost, it's investors. And so, especially for the publicly traded companies, they want to maintain their shareholder confidence. And in that, there's a whole legal realm that dictates how they're to share this information. And so it is gone through a lot of work to try to produce this. But those investors pick up this information, they rate, they rank it, hold companies accountable. The second stakeholder group that is really interested in this information are current and future employees. So a lot of companies are finding that if they don't make things happen, that they're not going to find the talent that they need and that they want to enable resiliency for their company in the future. It is really important to them to use these standards and frameworks, and all of, or most of them, we hold the licenses for here in the United States. And that's the practice that gets applied to maintaining that structure and producing something that is quality, that does combat that term greenwashing. So kind of putting it all into perspective, there is a lot that goes into this to be as tried and true to the people that will review this information.
I love that. So, but that way you can compare these companies kind of apples to apples as far as are they really what they say, and then that way the investors can pick and choose because of this transparency, and so can the employees. And so, how did you personally get into this? Is this the kind of thing where one day you wake up and you decide to into ESG and sustainability, or just what led you into this path?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think for a lot of sustainability professionals, they kind of fumbled into this because it wasn't until the last 10 years or so that there are actually academic programs built around sustainable management principles, for instance. And so before, a lot of people, I would say a lot of the professionals that I've met have lived and worked abroad, have seen, what a change, what a difference companies can make if they put this into perspective and they use this ESG or sustainability lens in the work that they do. So for me, I had been I studied international relations. I was working in the international development space and mostly in post-conflict areas. In that, I was always kind of daydreaming what would be necessary to avoid conflict in the future and how to build in a way that now we reference as sustainable development. So taking into account the people, that social side, and taking into account the environment and how we protect that and use resources more efficiently, and then how we govern ethically. And so all of that kind of, at the time, there was no way to put it all together and to create like a solid trajectory for myself. And then fast forward, I did a master's program at the University of Arkansas Clinton School of Public Service. And it was the first year at the Clinton School. He wanted everyone to follow his leadership approach, which meant being in the field. So one of the programs that I embarked on was to understand how to analyze the sustainability of companies by working at a bank in the Netherlands called Triodos Bank. And at the time they said, okay, you're American. We want you to analyze these US-based companies using this framework called the Global Reporting Initiative. And when I started getting into that, the light bulb did go off at that time because it brought together the environmental, the social, the governance aspects of running a business. And when I called companies to ask for the information, they didn't have it. And they were shocked that anyone was looking for it because this was about 15 years ago. At the time, there was only about 11% of the S&P 500 in general producing this of reporting. And so I saw it as an opportunity to come back to the United States and to introduce these concepts. And so teamed up with that standard I mentioned, the Global Reporting Initiative, and became one of their first training partners in the US. And since I was used to grassroots approach to everything, we applied that. So we're competing against, larger companies like big four accounting firms like KPMG or Deloitte and trying to spread the word. But I think, really impactful because we weren't just speaking to corporations. We were speaking to practitioners, universities, anyone we could. And we weren't caring about making money. We were caring more about the mission. And so I think that really helped accelerate things here in the US.
Amazing. And so I'm getting out of your journey here is sort of that knowledge is power, and that maybe the mess we found ourselves in, right, with humanity, with kind of polluting our planet and being on a path where it's not sustainable, right, where our economy depends on literally crushed up dinosaur
Yeah,
fluids, and once not even like a naturally occurring layer of the earth, it's just dinosaurs, and once that's out, then it's done. And we fought huge wars
yeah,
over it, and
exactly.
countries toppled over this black goo, when it's ridiculous when we can kind of find a better way. But then all these kind of come out after the fact, right, that such and such company knew about climate change since like 1981. Man, and if only there was transparency then, or if only
Exactly.
this was being talked about then,
Yeah.
then maybe it wouldn't be such a rougher path back to it. And so I just kind of love your mentality mindset here of like making it transparent, getting the word out, and talking to these companies and talking to the practitioners, especially as you said 10 years ago, when maybe the world quite there yet.
Yeah.
But now, would you say, are we kind of on a path? Are we kind of more aware, more enlightened about what's going on and what we need to change?
I think so. I think it just took a long time, and and that's another criticism from outside, is that we're not moving fast enough. But as a practitioner that works with, I don't know how many companies we've served over the years, but at any given time we have about 60 clients, and for all of them, the people that we're working with, we see that they're working night and day to try and make happen. And so, I mean, there is a little bit of a strain in what's to happen and what we can happen, or what we can do, on the mass, on the macro level. And so it takes some time. I don't know. Did that answer or maybe I could delve in a little bit deeper on a different piece.
Yeah, you're welcome to delve. It's just it seems this is a huge problem to solve, right?
Yeah.
Like, I'm overwhelmed even thinking about it. Just as far as these companies maybe need to be aware, and there's all these things that they could be doing differently. And like, where does it begin? Like, does it start with like the sustainable buildings, or like figuring out the waste, or like where do these
Yeah.
companies even like start to look for like the low hanging fruit as
Hmm.
far as being better?
Well, that's a really good question. When we started, a lot of companies were struggling to figure out, in this larger universe of different environmental, social, governance metrics, where to start. And so we had to help them prioritize, and that's a practice called materiality. So, anyhow, we do these assessments for them, we help them prioritize and narrow in. And I would say, all across the board, consistently, they found that greenhouse gas emissions is of material concern. That's a huge risk. There's a lot of opportunities for change there. So that is one of the first areas, and that's dependent on energy consumption data on top of waste. So with these environmentals, these measures that generally occur within the operation, so within the built environment, are some of the measures that we start to pull first. Once a company understands what their baseline is and they can start making informed decisions from that, then they realize, wow, the biggest emissions footprint is in our supply chain. And so we're starting to see only in the last few years that companies are now suggesting that their suppliers get on board. But that's a huge undertaking. Is where are they? Do you look at first tier suppliers, second tier, third tier? Where are the most risks? How do we understand the actual risk to the environment? How do we capture that information in a prohibitive manner? So it is a big effort, and those metrics are critically important. They're also now part of regulations. So there's regulations in California that just passed a few months ago, requiring all companies, whether or not they're headquartered in California, but if they're operating, it doesn't matter what size they are, to start to pull together what we call scopes 1, 2, and 3 emissions data. On top of that, the next layer will be to audit that data. So to provide evidence that it's quality and accurate data. So there's a huge rollout of that. It's happening in the EU as well. They passed some new directives for this type of reporting. So we know that those are kind of solid measures. And then on the social side, in the United States in particular, we have the diversity, equity, and inclusion measures. And so that across the board, most companies are looking at. But there is a lot of pushback. And I think more recently, we're starting to see a lot of congressional leaders or senators as well pushing back on this whole ESG space. And I do think it's so deeply rooted, it's not going anywhere. It's part of markets now. Stock exchanges trade on companies that have ESG data. It's not going here, but there will be a little bit of a fight, and it comes from that lack of knowledge and fear, right? The fear of the unknown. What are we going to do if we don't have oil anymore? Well, people will start to innovate, maybe first start to use less and be more conscious about their purchasing decisions. So, all the things that you mentioned are things that even the general public needs to wrap their minds around. We complain about war, we complain about the cars fueling our, how do we get to and from work without having plugins available in different housing complexes? But we also have to decide where we spend our money. So if we're spending a lot of money on toys that are also made from petroleum-based products for our kids, that's also a big decision. So there's a lot of education still that it's needed. And I see that rather than a roadblock as a good opportunity to then scale the change that's needed on a global scale.
I love it. So you're saying it begins with that data, that clean data, auditing the data, taking inventory, and then also educating everyone, including the general public, about these things. That way you can make these informed decisions. And you mentioned scaling, and we're exactly in the right place, right? We're in the Scaling Secrets podcast, and whenever you think about this whole scaling idea in general, right? Sometimes people talk about scaling like a company or locations or employees, and none of that sounds easy, but it all sounds worth it. And I get kind of a similar thought as far as all of the change that needs to be made. Like you mentioned, there's a kind of those three tiers. And if you're a company, even looking at your suppliers, and no one said it would be overnight. And also just from the general public, you see a lot of like all or nothing type of thinking, right? Like they say, well, you build the electric cars, but it takes petroleum to transform the electric car, so why bother? But like when you make your list and you're saying these, like you can change this, it seems like if you make all these small incremental changes, then you're on the right track, and it is a worthwhile endeavor, because what's the alternative, right?
Yeah.
Killing the planet. And so even though it is just give up and say, oh, there's so much to do, we still need to kind of press forward and move on. And so in your journeys, right, you say you have like 60 clients at a time usually, and you kind of do all this messaging and can do all this data and education. Has anything surprised you in your journey that worth talking about today?
What surprised me? I would say the biggest roadblock to a lot of change is based in the generational differences that we have within organizations, within the marketplace, as leaders ourselves. When we first started with the company, we got a lot of pushback from the C-suite at the time. That unfortunately older in their careers, they didn't have a wide perspective of why other things should be valued. And that has changed over. We have a younger, more bold, more compassionate leader in companies. And we don't expect that to change, but that's something that has been really surprising, is to see the shift through that. And then the same in the consultancy arena. Like we came in, we were pretty young at the time. I mean, I've aged a lot in the process, but we were young at the time. And we valued being atypical consultants. So not looking for every billable hour, not doing direct sales, not doing upsales, but really focused on connecting with our clients and trying to understand their needs, their challenges, and connecting as people first and foremost. So really running a human-centered business. And I've seen time and time again at how that has resulted in so much success. And again, that I think it's probably not taught that way in the classroom, but we're starting to see a shift. And believing that anything is possible as long as you stay true to yourself, you stay honest, you're transparent, and you recognize when things aren't going well. So the same for the companies, to be human centered and thinking like, okay, well, here's our data and it looks like we didn't do that well this year. And why was that? Well, let's just discuss it. And what does it hurt? We don't need to hide behind this candy coated glossy version of ourselves. We need to get behind why things are a certain way and make change. And I think that's a huge shift that we're seeing everywhere and around the world, and it'll still take some time to really firmly root, but it's happening. That's a nice surprise.
I agree that it is, that there's this new way of thinking that's maybe you think about like the way things used to be, where you kept things perhaps you didn't talk about actual problems, you didn't confront them. And now with this kind of human-centered approach, it includes having self-awareness, it includes having empathy and making those one-on-one connections. And I'm always thinking about with like guests such as you, right? Because it's a scaling secrets, and we kind of think about like what are the commonalities in all these different industries. And you just hear a lot about like the one-on-one human contact, right? Someone will say, well, I'm all about scaling and going after big dreams, but also I'll be on the phone X number of hours per day, or I'll make X number of calls, or I'll just do my follow-ups. And so that's a big lesson I'm getting from speaking with you, is just to take the time to care about people and to maybe reach out or send the messages or make the contacts, just because it adds up and it is meaningful and it is worthwhile, including all of the wonderful, amazing things that you're doing with your company today. And so, and now it's time for some promotion, right? Now it is time to say, well, we've brought in some awareness about this ESG concept, sustainability, where sometimes people go wrong or are not aware. But as far as your company and the other companies that need your help in order to get compliant, in order to get this data, in order to navigate the legalese, what's the solution that you provide and who is a good fit for you?
I think our best fit, our company is just getting started, because we're really good at getting in there and trying to understand where they have information, where they don't, where the gaps are, where the weaknesses are, and not imposing our ways, but really being an extension of those individuals that are juggling multiple hats to try to make this happen. We help build those foundations for them and get them on a path towards operationalizing this and building their teams out to do it. So I would say, first and foremost, those just getting started. Those that are more advanced, we do have the assurance work, so to validate or verify the data before it goes out to the public. And that's really helpful for companies that have been building this all along, but they're at the point where they're like, okay, now we feel confident in our information, and we just need someone to back that, or to give us a little more of a boost in the right direction, or in the direction of what's needed internally. So I would say anyone getting started, just don't be afraid. And I think you alluded to this too. Like, what do you have to lose? You have everything to lose if you don't do anything, but you have nothing to lose if you just get started. It's almost like the analogy of going up the escalator. Just get on the escalator, and before long, you'll be able to look back and see how far you've come. So I really liked you touched on as well. And I think that that's probably the most important point for most companies, and to not be afraid. That's something we hear time and time again from companies just reaching out to us for the first time. They're like, we don't have solar panels on our rooftops. We don't have DE&I programs yet. And we're like, that's okay. I mean, you're already thinking about the sexier side of sustainability when you should be thinking about what makes us a good and solid, strong business. Because from those foundations, you can start to grow and achieve and work this sustainable development dream. So I think those are the only things, is that no one's alone. Don't be afraid.
And others have this journey before you, and others have had these same fears and that same, I don't even know what the word is, but that feeling that you mentioned of like saying, oh, well, how far behind are we? Or they're our business, we don't even really want to think about it. It's even just to even consider. And I mean, fear is irrational, and is its own kind of crazy, unpredictable beast. But I don't know about you, Nancy, but whenever I'm fearful of something or worried or anxious, I look at data and I see a way to try to pile it up and say like, well, how do I make it where it's like this side is bigger or larger as far as taking the action I want to take, and this other side is maybe a pile of things that maybe it's only scary because I've let it sit for so long, and maybe there's a few things to be figured out, but the upside is way larger than the downside. And you're saying it's important to just get started, just take the leap. There's been so many times in our lives when you just had to just show up at the gym and then the working out will take care of itself, or you're nervous about the first day of school, just get yourself to class and then it'll be okay. Just start that first day of work, just get started. And so how can someone do that? If someone wants to kind of take this step and start that conversation and talk to you and your team and just figure out the possibilities, what can be done, what's the call to action? What's the next step?
Yeah, I would say just get in touch. I mean, we have our website, www.isosgroup.com, and we also have a training division. So attending some of our trainings not only helps build that knowledge set, but it results in certification that's recognized in the marketplace. So there's a lot of value in doing that. And then they would understand the overall process, and then they can start to prioritize. So like you're saying, it's overwhelming when there's so much out there, but just getting started, trying to build knowledge, and then working towards prioritizing efforts, that's what's going to help, I think, shape that view. And we have a group of amazingly talented consultants, that can also jump on the line to speak. We are, again, atypical consultants. We're not looking for billable hours or sales. We're just driven by sharing knowledge. And so we're not charging for phone calls or emails or any kind of, preliminary consultation like that. And then in addition, we were recently acquired. So it was actually 1 year ago that we were acquired by a group called Environ Energy. And they're more on the intervention side. So say a company realizes that they have a huge spend on electricity. They want to move to renewables. They want to maybe build infrastructure for renewables on site. Well, we have all those capabilities that we can also lend and connect interested people to. So we can work at the high level, we can work at the asset level, and it's a big group, now 120 strong, of individuals that are just compassionate and, again, human-centered. So don't be afraid.
Don't be afraid. Take action anyway.
Yeah.
A year from now, you'll wish you started today. And so, as far as cracking this ESG nut, you need to contact Nancy from isosgroup.com. That's ISOS group.com. And just get started. Dive into this information. Get certified, and that way you'll be able to prioritize and know what the next logical step is as far as getting your company more sustainable. And that means now you can have the certification that people will see and like, and it will help you and help the planet, and everybody wins. And some things are easy to do, but other things are easy not to do. So if this is a thing that you've wanted to do in your company and you've just been so just blocked, confused, there's other priorities, get this outside help from isosgroup.com. And, Nancy, whenever I talk to someone about climate change, I always start off just feeling so just bad about the future, because you always see these graphs about the CO2 just going off into like off the charts, and it seems scary. But then I talk to someone like you who's doing something and making a difference, and I think like, okay, like it will be okay as long as we don't keep doing what we've been doing for the past 50, 100 years, if we take new actions to get new results. And so thank you for this conversation. But before I let you go, it's time to put you on the spot and ask you for a lesson or quote that you think can apply to us today, because we're talking to some of these entrepreneurs who are all about these scaling secrets. So does anything come to mind for you when I ask you about a favorite quote or lesson that will be really helpful for us?
I think, building on what we've discussed today, and something that I was about was this quote from Gandhi that we've all heard, and being a part of the change that we want to see in the world and really trying to live that. And I think in that there are various principles also that we've touched upon, and that's diligence, being diligent with your actions, with your time tracking, your prioritization. Another thing that we found to be extremely helpful is no ego. And that comes down to that human-centered piece. You can leverage information, you can leverage insight so much easier if you leave the ego at the door. And we no longer have time for ego. A big part of sustainability is being efficient. So we want to be efficient with our time and everything we put out into the world. And then collaboration. You're saying knowing that there are others around who can help, who have been there, who are willing to help and sharing there. And all of those work really well together in scaling initiative an individual takes on if they really try to epitomize some of those values.
Various values, and they're all principles that we need to take in, absorb, and digest and use every day. And the next step towards doing this and pursuing ESG and sustainability and everything that goes along with that is by going to isosgroup.com, and we'll see you there. And thank you very much, Nancy, for stopping by and just sharing all your experiences and wisdom in our conversation. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's been a wonderful conversation.
All righty.